All right, there we are. Let's see. Let me just give it a second. Make sure it's all going well. Okay. And we're live. There we go. People, welcome to the channel. The first live stream. I'm buzzing. I'm learning new things as I go along. And yeah, we're on obviously on StreamYard. Welcome, SonOfChelsea, my guy. How's it going?
Really good, man. Thank you for inviting me on. It's great to see you stepping onto YouTube, joining the game. I saw some people recently saying, there's not enough space for another Chelsea YouTuber. Completely disagree. I mean, internet's such a big place, man, and YouTube's a big place. There's space for everyone. So it's great to see you starting the channel and already passing 1K. So congrats for that, man.
Thank you. Yeah, no, honestly, it's my dream to be a YouTuber. This is my third time trying it, and literally I've been on your channel so many times now, and I just thought this is the perfect first guy to get on. I know you're going to be articulating your points well, and it's great because what I wanted to do just for the live chat, just so you understand what we're doing here today, I want to do a squad breakdown, as you can hopefully see in the title. I want to go through every single player in this whole damn squad, and I want to speak about what their future holds, how their season's been going, and just a little profile, a little player profile, a little check of each player and get our thoughts and opinions on each guy in the squad. So we'll start with the goalkeepers. Now, this position, this is a position that's been up for air for the whole last year or so in Frank's reign. And obviously this season, it's calmed down a little bit. We've managed to solidify ourselves with Mendy in goal. But let's go through each goalkeeper and just speak about what obviously how their season's going and what their future holds. So we'll start off with Mendy himself. What is your thoughts when you think of Mendy and just hear that name in general? Because for me, straight away, stability and comfort is the first thing I think of.
Yeah, I'd probably say calm is the first word that comes to mind. And that's what generally Chelsea have needed for a while in that position. But just, in terms of defensively, he's been incredible. He really has. He's made a few brilliant saves and, that's a positive as well. But just the demeanor he's given to that defense. I mean, I think you could talk, and I don't want to jump ahead, but I think you can make comparisons between the impact Edouard Mendy's given to us as a team defensively to the way Thiago Silva has. And that's danger awareness, that's dominance, that's presence. But, it's not, overawing. It's just very assured. This is a guy who it doesn't seem to faze him that he's walked into one of the biggest clubs in the Premier League. He's walking into a position where there was of course there's been pressure around that position with Kepa, but he's walked in and there was going to be pressure on him because Chelsea fans were so desperate for us to improve in that area. He's taken it in his stride, and I think Frank Lampard's comments about him being low maintenance and being a humble guy, this is an incredible story in terms of a Chelsea player. And I think seeing his rise and the fact he was looking for a job unemployed at 23, 24 for a professional footballer, and I think it shows you the resilience, and it's the sort of character you want in the dressing room. And at 28 he's in the prime of his career, he's motivated, and he's adding everything we need in that defense. So really, I think in terms of ratings, he's going to be right up there in terms of players so far this season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to touch on that, I think actually so far he's been player of the season in terms of not only player of the season, but also the best purchase, of course. But I just think he's made such an upgrade in that position. When he steps out onto the pitch, I just feel so much more confident. He's looked so calm, so assured, as you said. He's coming out for crosses. He's doing all the basics and also pulling off some really good saves as well. He's no Mickey Mouse in goal. And I love his story as well. His story is so inspirational for anybody trying to make it at the top of the game. Mentality, we speak about it, and it's undermined on Twitter especially so often. And that's why I love that I can come over to YouTube now and speak about these things a little bit more and in a little bit more detail. Mentality is underestimated so much. There's so many talented footballers, technically gifted footballers, Adel Taarabt, Ben Arfa, but maybe they didn't reach the pinnacle of the game. You maybe question their mentality or the way that they looked after themselves, etc., etc. That is such a big part of the game. And I think Mendy's mentality from where he's gone and the depths he's had to go to get his career back on track, rise through the ranks in France, and then come to a big club like this and be given the #1 shirt and have to own it. It's been incredible, and long may it continue. And I think, what are your thoughts on, just to finish up with Mendy? Obviously, he was bought in, and people, for only 18, 20 million, people thought, oh, maybe he's just a stopgap. But do you think he can actually become the long-term #1? Because personally, that's what I'm trying to see. I'm not trying to see anybody replace Mendy right now. I love him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of talk that Chelsea didn't heavily invest in our defence, but we did. It was just we didn't spend a lot of money on it. We did heavily invest on our defence. We did improve it. And I think Mendy's a prime example of that. He's not going to go for 90 million, but you think like with his experience, the way it's you can never sort of compare goalkeepers to outfield players because of their longevity. Goalkeepers can go into their mid to late 30s, as we've seen with Willy Caballero. So there's a longevity there as well. And you think if he can grow and get more confident with the chemistry of in Chelsea, if that back four and back five is very settled by the end of the season, why would you go out there and spend more? If he's adding everything, I see in, comments here, Donnarumma, and I'm sure Oblak brought up as well, but I'm not sure. I think that we want to see this team improved. We want to see Chelsea, spend on good players to improve the squad and improve our chances. But if that's the solution, then I don't see why you'd want to go out and disrupt that again if a player feels comfortable. The only concern at the moment is backup keeper, right? Because if Chelsea decide that Mendy's going to be number one, this is the big guy now, we're going with him as first choice, then the question needs to be posed, because Willy Caballero, this is likely his last season, right? Kepa, I'm sure, will be off somewhere next summer, I'm sure. Then you need to find a replacement. I think that's the only concern in this area for me in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen Donnarumma in the chat as well. I think the only stumbling block on there, of course, now he's running out of contract at the end of the season. It doesn't look like he's going to renew. I'm not too sure on the ins and outs of that situation. Obviously, a very top up-and-coming young goalkeeper to go for free. The only issue is his agent. I believe it's still Raiola. The club don't like dealing with him. That's why the Lukaku deal fell short under Kante when he tried to bring him in instead of Morata as his first choice. Of course, he's working with him now into Milan. So that might be a little stumbling block to your Donnarumma deal. But for me, Donnarumma, I haven't watched too much of him. I can't lie. I don't watch Italian football religiously. But if you've got a goalkeeper who's not only built up chemistry and a relationship with the back line, and you got him on a cheap, and he's doing brilliantly, and he's not costing you games, he's actually saving you points, why would you change that, as Daniel said? So I completely agree. Obviously, just brushing up on the other two goalkeepers who are currently obviously backup choices. I'm asking you here because I didn't really know, and obviously Petr Cech we can add into the fold as well as a little bit of a joke, but Kepa wasn't in the squad in our last game. Was that due to injury? Because I didn't hear too much about that.
Yeah, he's had a shoulder injury the past couple of games, and I assume that's just him not being fully ready yet and them not throwing him in. I mean, I think that it's going to be intriguing. I'm sure the next game, because he wasn't even in the squad, and it's a massive squad you have for a Champions League game. So you think, anyone can get on that bench, basically. So it's going to be intriguing to see what Lampard does. I think the next sort of squad will be interesting to see who Frank picks as second choice. I wonder if it's a little bit like, what side of the bed does Frank wake up on in the morning in terms of who's going to be his backup goalkeeper? And I think that's probably disingenuous for me, because I still lean in the direction of Caballero. I don't think Caballero has ever let Chelsea down in terms of, he's never made massive mistakes. He's not a world-class goalkeeper, but he's a safe pair of hands, cliche and all that. But in terms of some of the performances he put in to stabilize the defense at the back end of last season, I think he deserves his place on the bench. The issue is, I think, for Chelsea, maybe politically behind the scenes of Kepa and any value for him, because where is he going to get these games? Unless it's a dead rubber at the end of this Champions League group where Chelsea for the last game on, are through and don't have to play to get top spot, perfect scenario, then you see Kepa come in. We're not in the League Cup anymore. The FA Cup is really the only time where you think there's going to be that rotation. But if Mendy is the main goalkeeper, you'd think Caballero would have as much shot of being an FA Cup goalkeeper as Kepa does. So it's going to be intriguing. I think they're both in similar places, aren't they? I think in terms of their Chelsea careers.
For sure. And I think just to add on to that, that's why I was so, disappointed that we got knocked out of the Carabao Cup. Not because, not only is it an opportunity for Frank to secure a trophy, which I think is vital and it's very important that we strive to do that. This is a young squad. And I remember, I keep bringing this up. It's something that I am overcompensating. But Joe Cole spoke so well in his first, Carling Cup win there with Chelsea under Jose Mourinho. And they spoke about how that felt like the Champions League, because it was so important to get that winning mentality for that young squad. And I'd love Mount, Tammy, Tomori, James, all these guys to get their first team trophy. That was a big disappointment last season in the FA Cup final against Arsenal. And again, Carabao Cup was a great opportunity. And also, secondly, is because we have such a big squad, as we're obviously going to have to go through. Kepa, Caballero, as you spoke about, these guys, Kepa especially needs minutes for his value on the market. But I'd even switch it up and say maybe it's actually detrimental to him to play, and it actually might just decrease his value, similar to a Bakayoko in Lampard's first pre-season, where he got the opportunities in Ireland and he didn't actually capitalize on them, and we couldn't actually get rid of him because he played so poorly. So maybe Kepa in the stands is actually a good thing for the market value of the player, and then in January hopefully he can get a move to Spain. Moving on to the defense. Now I'm going to start at right back. We've got a great bit of competition there. Obviously at the back end of last season, Lamptey was spoken about a lot. Reece James was going for a really rough patch of form, and some fans, they didn't really stick with him through that, and they started to doubt his potential. Never me though, ladies and gentlemen. gentlemen, never me. Okay, I knew Reece James was going to be a baller. I think he's a very complete footballer. Got his England call up today. What do you make of Reece James and the way he started the season?
He's been one of the top performers so far for Chelsea. There's no doubt about that. And I think that it's brilliant for Reece that he has Dave as competition, because I think a lot of us predicted at the start of this year it was going to be a fight between those two, rightly, because the big question that Reece had to answer this season to become the certified right back for Chelsea is, are you good defensively? Are you intelligent, one-on-one in defense, being in the right place at the right time, all the things that Dave has done. Dave's not as good defensively, but in terms of natural defending, he's been one of the best at the club for a number of years. His versatility is incredible. And that was a challenge for Reece. But Reece has impressed me as much going forward, which we know the talent is there for delivery, as we saw against Rennes, as it is defensively. I think that's a massive improvement so far. And you can make the case for a lot of defenders so far for Chelsea this season with the defensive improvement, but Reece has been incredible. He really has. And it's wonderful to see. And on the Lamptey sort of debate, I tweeted about this earlier, and I've probably made a point in the video before that I think that it's a shame for Lamptey. I'm happy for Lamptey. He took control of his career. He's going to have a good career, I'm pretty sure, at Brighton and beyond that. But Reece is the player to back, and I think Chelsea, it's not like, I could understand if Lamptey was sold and there wasn't a younger right back there that we had, to sort of fill in. It's not a PDB situation. It's not anything like that. It's just an unfortunate thing. And Chelsea have a lot of young right backs, and a lot of young fullbacks being developed at the club and the academy. So with Livramento coming through as well, we could see this similar situation if Reece is nailing down that right back spot. But he's been exceptional, and I'm happy now he's finally got an assist, because he deserved one. It was long overdue, an assist.
100%, way overdue. And I'm seeing in the chat he's getting called tank and whatnot, and he is a tank. By the way, this is a guy that bounced off Hulk at the age of 19, I believe, at Wigan, or 18. So in pre-season in China. Now, of course, Reece, for me, and Azpilicueta, you've got perfect competition there. You couldn't have a better balance. I think when you're trying to get two young players, and I do worry about this in the future when we go with Ampadu, Rice potentially joining the club, and you've got Gilmour as well, how you're going to rotate three very young players who potentially need minutes to actually develop. Lamptey was smart. He got out and he knew that it was very difficult to go up against Reece. And you can't really have a position so stable like right back, where you're meant to really try and keep your defensive structure the same every game, to be rotating right backs. It doesn't really work very well for either development for me. And I think Azpilicueta is the perfect deputy to teach him and to also come in when he needs a rest. And I'd have Azpilicueta deputizing the left back before I'd have any of the other left backs come in either. And to quickly transition to the left backs now, Chilwell's come in. Personally, just to put my stamp on it, because I have to make it very clear, he was not my first choice. In fact, my first choice was Reguilon at Tottenham, who's doing quite well. And I even went to Telles as well, who's joined Manchester United. But Chilwell has really surprised me. And not only because he's so solid and consistent, he's going very under the radar, because he's not really putting in a masterclass, but then he's just consistently delivering 7s and 8s out of 10s, which is exactly what you want, by the way, from your left back. And he, like I said, he's very assured. He had a really poor season last season, and that's why I was so skeptical, especially with the high price tag. And I felt like there was cheaper, more quality options on the market. I'm pretty sure I said this probably on your channel quite a few times. But what a surprise he's been. And is this what you expected from Chilwell?
Chilwell has been my best performer so far this season. I think he has just head and shoulders. And that's actually quite an insight. I put out a poll earlier with a bunch of candidates, and they were all defenders, which I think says a lot. And it was very close, very, very close. But for me, Ben has offered and brought in everything that Chelsea needed in a left-back role. I saw when we signed Ben Chilwell, people bring up stats that in terms of like when you compare him to Marcos Alonso, he's just a slightly better Alonso. And it's like, not only is that, just failing the eye test. And I think, I like to look at data on my channel. I like to look at stats. I think they're important. I think that they can bring, actual relevance to your argument. But I think Ben Chilwell, it was about the eye test. When you watched Ben Chilwell, what he offered to that Leicester side at the best of times last season, compared to what Marcos Alonso could offer to us or Emerson could offer to us, you knew there was going to be an improvement. I've been stunned at how good defensively, a bit like Reece, how good defensively he's been. I expected him to add the acceleration, mobility, and a new dynamic that we desperately needed on that left side in attack, which he absolutely has. As we saw against the low block against Burnley, it's so important now, that fullback play. And finally, we've got similar levels of threat and mobility and acceleration and quality on both sides, which is brilliant. But in terms of defense, I mean, Chilwell has just been exceptional. He really has. I think in terms of timing, in intelligence, in aerial duels, he's been brilliant. I was speaking about this with Nini earlier on my channel. where, in terms of a guy, he's not the tallest player, but wins a lot of headers. If you look at him, he's usually winning 100% of aerial duels. He's done it against Rennes. This is a guy who's intelligent as well. Very rarely is he having one-on-ones with wingers, like we saw with Marcos Alonso last season. And it was a case where it was such a desperate position to strengthen. For me, for months and months, it was my number one priority position because I watched Chelsea so many times last season. And it was just, Marcos Alonso is a brilliant left wing back. He absolutely is. He was perfect for that role. And no Chelsea fan should ever discard what Marcos Alonso did for Chelsea, right? But it's just what Lampard wants to do. He needs that type of fullback. And Chilwell has been, for me, brilliant so far, faultless so far for Chelsea. And it's just wonderful to see because I think there were, as you said, as many people, there were so many targets out there. But for Lampard to be backed, for him to say, this is my first choice, he's been proven absolutely right so far of why he wanted Ben Chilwell in his team.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like I said, this is why it's great to be wrong as a fan, because like I said, we're all interested in Chelsea winning. So if Chilwell's proven me wrong big time so far, the long may it continue, because I've been sick to death of that left back spot being quite a hindrance to the team. A lot of individual errors have come from over there. And yeah, on Alonso, I mean, he's, like you said, he's a great left wing back, but I think that incident that happened with the team bus for him as well, that's definitely put him down in the pecking order. You saw Emerson come on against Rennes as the second choice, cemented now. And to be honest, I think Emerson should have been the second choice anyway. I just think he's more comfortable as a left back. So that doesn't really surprise me. Obviously, I want to make sure we engage with the chat. So great questions coming in, guys. I really will try to get to as many as possible. This is a really good one. Obviously, fixture congestion. Now, just to quickly brush up on this, because we are going through the whole squad. It's not something I really do worry about. I think we have probably the biggest squad in terms of quality and depth in the Premier League. So I think in terms of a squad going into the Christmas period, we couldn't be more lucky with 5 centre backs, 3 left backs, and so on. So I think if there's any squad that can handle a fixture congestion, is us. It's just the matter of fact that Frank Lampard obviously has to rotate and try and get the best use out of this team as much as possible. So really good question. Going into the centre backs now, 5 centre backs, as I mentioned, that's ridiculous, right? I think that's almost unhealthy competition. The pecking order seems to be quite clear. You've got Silva, Zuma as your starting. Rudiger. Now, I know you're a big Rudiger fan, or maybe you was. I haven't got the update, but this guy is third choice. What do you think of that? Because they had a little conversation. I don't know if the Fleck reported it. Yeah. It
all happened very quickly, didn't it? Before the Krasnodar game, Matt Law reported it. I spoke about on my channel that apparently Frank and Rudy had sort of, had conversations, and I think, maybe they both sort of seen the writing was on the wall. Rudiger's not going to be a long-term player for Chelsea, but I think maybe they looked at market value. If they can, play him a few times, he impresses, that it helps maybe his market value in January. What that means for younger centre-backs like Tomori, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But in terms of Rudiger, I think you've got to be impressed with what Rudiger did, especially against Krasnodar. He was out in the cold for so many, basically months, and he comes back in and he performs, competently, efficiently, just the sort of performance you want Rudy to have. Nothing out of the ordinary. I think once again, to me, proving why. I think we can get to a debate here, but I think that, I think Rudiger Christensen, this debate gets brought up a lot, and it's probably irrelevant now to Chelsea fans, to be honest, in terms of, because neither of them are probably going to be playing that much football. But for me, there's no competition in terms of who I'd have in a defense. If someone said to me, pick one centre back, if Thiago Silva goes down with an injury, and you can only pick one of Christensen or Rudiger, it's Rudiger every day of the week. And I know he's made mistakes recently, but I think he still adds that sort of aerial dominance that you probably need. He can still, he still plays for Germany. This is something that my dad brings up all the time, is like, he plays for Germany. He gets selected for Germany on a regular basis. And I know people can argue about squad depth and squad strength for international teams, but if you're getting picked for Germany, you're not an awful player. I can never sort of buy the argument that Rudiger's an awful player, because I've watched him. He had a poor season last year, but a lot of Chelsea defenders did. I think it's interesting. I don't know what you think about this. It's interesting that Frank was very firm and adamant, or at least they'd made it pretty clear before transfer deadline day that Rudiger was no longer part of Chelsea's plans. Yeah. And then a couple of weeks later, he's back in the plans. I mean, I don't know if that's going to provide any friction for Lampard in terms of dressing room. I don't know. I'm not starting any rumors here. It's just an interesting thing, isn't it? That a player out in the cold. It could work the other way, where it's a good piece of man management, where you're bringing an outcast player into the fold and playing him every now and then. So it may not be that big of an issue.
I think also that what works in Rudiger's favour is, obviously, like you said, he's being picked regularly for Germany, but also the fact that he's very liked and loved in the dressing room. So I think if you're picking players now out of those three centre-backs, Christensen, Tomori, Rudiger, who's got the biggest personality, who's maybe got the most influence in a dressing room, is probably Rudiger. Obviously, we've used the Agent Rudy hashtag to try and bring in Timo and Kai. He was used as part of the promotion by the club as well. So even I was personally quite shocked, and I said this on the byline with Alex. I said I was very shocked that he was actually just turned away, off you go, because I thought, well, at least if you're going to do this, maybe ease him out and have that period with Kai and Timo where you at least try and make it look like their friend is not being cast away so quickly. Tomori, I do feel sorry for. For me, I would have Tomori as third choice, just because I feel like his minutes, I feel like these are minutes he could be getting, especially against the opponents that Rudiger's getting right now. I feel like Tomori's development should be put as a higher priority, but I do understand what you're saying about market value. That is something that is very important. If they are looking to sell Rudiger or Christensen in the January market, then they're going to need to get their market value up and give them some minutes. So it's a tussle between the two. Obviously, personally, I'd go for Tomori, but I do understand the other side of things. Moving into the midfield, there's a lot of comments on Kante. Obviously, we're going to get to him. But let's firstly start with Jorginho, because he's probably been the deepest midfielder, the most consistent. So I'll start with him at the base. What has been your thoughts on him this season? Because personally, I thought he started quite well. I mean, I think he was top scorer at one point because he got penalties, but then things just seemed to derail, and not in a really obvious Jorginho way where he's getting pulled in transition against Sheffield United type stuff. But for me, what I expect from Jorginho is his passing to be crisp, his passing to be adventurous, him to be looking for balls over the top. And there's been quite a few instances now in recent games where he's not seen the pass, let alone aim for the pass and not get it. He's actually not seen it. And that's really disappointing, because obviously last season we didn't have much vision in the team. We didn't have Kai Havertz. We didn't have Ziyech. So Jorginho for me was really important for the fact that our wingers, Willian and Pedro, weren't the most creative wingers. We didn't have any vision from deep. So we needed someone to hit those long balls. Now it's not so necessary if you have Ziyech and Kai dropping in. So what has been your thoughts with Jorginho really not utilising his own strengths?
I think it's surprising he's featured as much as he has. I think all of us at the back end of last season were convinced that he may be off, but that never sort of came to fruition because there wasn't a club willing to spend big on him, and I think Chelsea are not going to let him go for cheap. So then he becomes part of the plans. He's a leader in the dressing room, I'm sure, and also on the pitch we see that. I think he's a good figure to have. In terms of, I think it's always that big debate. I think we had it on my channel a few weeks ago in relation to Kante and the characteristics of your midfield and what Lampard wants from that midfield has always been a big question, hasn't it? And in terms of what is the deepest line player? Do you have a two? Do you have one player sitting a little bit deeper? It is the frustration with Jorginho, and it's the same with Kovacic. That game against Krasnodar was a real big frustration to me, because you can have a go at Kova and Georgie, especially Jorginho for his defensive frailties. But the one thing you expect him to do is to bring a rhythm, a tempo, a sense of control to our game. He failed to do that throughout, and the adventurous passing. He is a good passer. We see this every now and then, as we've seen this season with the ball over to Timo against Southampton. That's brilliant vision. The vision is there. I don't know if it's. I can't believe Frank's telling a player of Jorginho's, what we've seen with quality before, to go out there and not play that adventurous pass, because this is an expressive team, and you want to get the ball into Ziyech, into Havertz, into Timo, as further, as high up the pitch as possible. I thought he had a really good game against Crystal Palace where he was up against a low block. And I think the Crystal Palace and Southampton games were like perfect sort of the best and the worst of Jorginho, right? When Jorginho excels against a low block, he can really dictate the play. He had a wonderful game that day. I mean, people were having a go that he doesn't have what's the phrase, sort of a range of passing. And he showed that on that day against Crystal Palace. But then 2 weeks later, the litmus test against Southampton, a high pressing team, we know what happened in that second half. So it's a concern, right, for Frank when sticking with this 4-3-3. I like the fact if you, as we saw against Rennes, if you're going to bring back Jorginho, play him in the 4-3-3. That's his most comfortable formation. I think you've got to play to his strengths to try and get the best out of him. But I agree. I want to see more adventure from Georgie when he's on the ball, because I know he's got the quality. Even just the sight, just ticking over play, you want that from a player like him. And unfortunately, we're not seeing it as much at the moment. And I think there's the opportunity for Chelsea to do that, because we look more balanced. We look more like a team who can deal with transitions, can control a game, can stop the momentum going against us a bit more. So I'm a bit stunned by that, to be honest.
Yeah, and I like what you said there about Jorginho coming and changing the tempo of games. That is something that I got used to away to Palace last season after lockdown, and he did come on and really change the tempo of the game and literally slow everything down just so we had some control and we wasn't going end to end. And I love that because, you know, as much as Lampard wants to play a high intensity pressing team, as he's always shown with the likes of using Mount and now Ziyech as well to start those presses in the first third of the pitch, we also do need to know when to calm it down and to control games, especially in this fixture congested period. And just to go from this question, yeah, Jorginho can play those balls over the top for sure. I mean, we've seen it done, especially with Tammy last year. He does like that first time little whip around the corner ball into the space. The only issue with Jorginho is that he's not Fabregas at it. You see, Fabregas had the perfect weight of pass. He had the perfect timing of pass. Jorginho sometimes frustrates me because he doesn't, and this is coming from a big Jorginho fan. Anybody on Twitter will know I try and do propaganda for this man whenever I can because I just love his mentality. Obviously, him giving the penalties to Timo the other day. I love his attitude. I love the way he's kind of gone against the grain, and the fans at Stamford Bridge obviously booed him at some point, and he managed to get over that and surpass that and prove everybody wrong. I love that. And obviously, he hasn't been given the vice captaincy for no reason. But with his passing over the top and in behind, he doesn't always weight them perfectly, and it does bobble a bit, or it's a little bit over hit, and it's frustrating because if those were cleaner passes, you'd have a lot more chances. So it is an area of his game that does worry me sometimes. And obviously you brought up Kovacic as well. I thought, you know, this player is a victim of circumstance for me. He obviously player of the year last year, and now he's really struggling to get minutes. And I've said this so many times, and I want to get your thoughts on it. For me, in a 4-3-3, Kovacic is not a 6 and he's not an 8. And what I mean by that is obviously Mount you can see is an 8, Havertz is an 8. They can really get in the final third and make a contribution, make a difference. Kovacic is much better in the first third of the pitch, using his press-resistant dribbling to get out and using those qualities that he has. Is obviously his awareness is top-notch, and he can really help progress the ball into the next third for a Mount or a Kai. But again, he's not a 6 because do you really trust him to sit on his own and hold a midfield and anchor a midfield and defend and hold his position? So there's no real space for him in this team, if we're being honest. And that's weird for a player of the year, isn't it?
It is, and I think, you know, the 4-3-3, you know, if you're playing a 4-2-3-1, you can't argue we haven't seen Kova and Kante, right? I think that was earlier in the season. I think a lot of us thought, hey, that's the pivot. You know, Frank's going for a 4-2-3-1. But then, as Frank has done a lot of times during his Chelsea managerial career, he switches up the formation, and you have to think, you know, differently about how that midfield looks and what Frank Lampard wants from that midfield. You know, I think him going back to Kante as the lone DM has really hurt players like Jorginho and Kovacic. Sorry, because Kovacic, to me, I agree with what you're saying. You know, it's hard to define him. For me, the best way I describe him, he's a connector player. He's a brilliant player to get, you know, resist the press that usually happens against Chelsea, especially against better teams, and connect from defense to midfield to attack. That's his best game, and I think there's a misunderstanding about what Kovacic's best sort of play is and what you can do to utilize him. I do think you have to put some responsibility on a player when he comes on against Rennes the other night, and when he starts against Krasnodar. As I said with Jorginho, they didn't take control of that game, right? That's the game where Kova, who's player of the season last year, he's not a young player. He's in the prime of his career. He's got to take that opportunity. You know, I'm not talking about him scoring a goal, but he's got to show that he can thrive in a midfield where Chelsea are going to dominate a game. And it was just night and day. The moment Frank made those changes, he brought off Jorginho and Kovacic, brought on Kante and Mount, went to a 4-3-3. It was like something clicked. And that's dangerous for Kova and Georgie because what Frank, I think, wants from this team, unfortunately, as was always going to be the case with a new manager coming in, there was going to be victims. And unfortunately, with the way Frank is, with the way this team is evolving, it's going to be hard for those players. I just think the concern we all have, right, is, as an earlier question said, if you get injuries to key players and you have to rotate in what is a ridiculously congested season, Frank has to manage that midfield well. And maybe sometimes he has to sacrifice a little bit of maybe the intention he has in some games. Maybe he has to shift to a 2 in midfield. But remember last season, I mean, some of the best periods of the season last year was, you know, we saw Jorginho and Kova in a 2, in a 3-4-3. We saw them excel in a 4-3-3. So I don't think these players are bad players. I think that's a stupid thing to say. But I think it's all about what Lampard wants from that midfield. And that's always been quite unclear. And it seems he's heading in a direction that moves away from utilising a Kovacic or Jorginho, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it's tough. It's difficult for fans because, like you said, Lampard does change formation so often. You know, he's gone from a double pivot where I can see Kovacic really getting a lot of minutes in that double pivot. I would be really for that. I think he's a player that suits that role perfectly because, like I said, it's not too attacking, but also he's got someone next to him to help him defend in a two. And it kind of gets the best out of all of his good quality traits. And I think with Lampard, I have to add as well is he is a very inexperienced manager, right? So what do you do as an inexperienced manager? You kind of go off what you've done in your playing career a little bit to kind of guide you, help you learn from those things, and obviously managers that you worked under. And he's always really played in a 4-3-3 for the majority of his career. So why would you not play a 4-3-3 with Chelsea? It just makes sense. And if you look at the midfielders Lampard played with, you know, maybe idolized potentially as well. You played with a Ballack, you played with an Essien, you played with a Mikel, a Makelele. These are very well-rounded midfielders. They're not specialist type players. And the likes of Jorginho and Kovacic are very specialist. They're very good at their specialist things, but they're very specialist. And they really work better with a coach that kind of works in a system. But obviously Lampard is a little bit more free than that. And that's why I can see I can kind of see why they're not going to get as much game time. I think Kovacic is certainly one that I would keep around for a lot longer, especially next season. I still think he can have great use if he can get back to the levels that he showed last season. I was quite disappointed in that last outing in the Champions League there where they played against. I keep calling them Coastal FC. You keep pronouncing it correctly. Fair play to you. But literally, yeah. But they really disappointed me in that pivot because I expected them to play very well. It was something that I was asking for to rest Kante because I didn't think he had a good start either to the season, and they really just let us down. They wasn't controlling as they should have. But yeah, I think Jorginho long term. I don't think he's going to be here long term. I do still think that they'll try and get rid of him as they did this summer and bring in a more natural lone DM. Obviously, been linked with Rice. I've been doing a lot of propaganda for Ethan Ampadu. I think is really underrated as well. But I do think Chelsea are looking for that lone DM, and I think Jorginho will be another player that they try and move on. Kovacic, I'm hoping they keep because I still think he can be utilised at least off the bench and definitely starting sometimes against big teams. And obviously onto big teams, Kante at lone DM against big teams. What are your thoughts on Kante at lone DM? Because I've spoken on this quite a lot on Twitter, and by the way, copped some heat for it. Very, very, very dangerous territory to speak about Kante on Twitter. What are your thoughts on this guy at lone DM at the moment?
I mean, if you watched my channel a couple of weeks ago, everything that's happening now, I made to look like a bit of an idiot when Frank changed to a 4-3-3, because I think I was saying, it looks like it's going to be the 4-2-3-1. He's sticking to the 4-2-3-1, which means Kante is not a lone DM. I think we have to see it against, it's whether Frank's going to be bold enough to do it against, say, Spurs. That's going to be the game, I think, where we see how brave Frank is to go with that formation and play Kante particularly as a lone DM. I think that's the big thing at the moment, and sort of thinking if that's going to happen. I'm not entirely sure. I think that it's a tough thing. I think that Kante was amazing against Burnley. He was one of the best performances I've seen from Kante in years almost. I think it was a perfect performance. And as well, you're talking about sort of Jorginho not playing passes as well. Kante that day against Burnley was, some of the passes, he was the shifts, switches of play out to Reece James and Ben Chilwell were incredible. And, if Georgie does that, it's getting thrown across the timeline, and that's something, unfortunately, that maybe Kante, it goes under the radar a bit because you're thinking about his interceptions, which were brilliant. I hope it works, at least until we can get Rice potentially, because I think that 4-2-3-1 is a compromise. And I just think that you want to let these attackers loose. And I just wonder if that will work. And as your comment just came up on screen now, that's really the big comment. And I'd argue some of the best performances last season were all with the 4-3-3. Billy Gilmour was playing there, against Liverpool and Everton, brilliant performances. If you think back to the best period under Lampard, almost this time last year, it was the 4-3-3 that worked. He wasn't really switching formation, and Mount was playing at the left of a midfield three, and you've seen how it's really elevated Mount's game, especially against Burnley. So Kante, it's always a big debate, isn't it? And I think you always get into dangerous territory when you start speaking about Kante, because people assume that you're underrating him, that you're having a go at him, that you think he should be sold. No, we shouldn't be selling N'Golo Kante. He's like, probably, I know it's changed this year, but especially last year, one of the the only world-class players we have in the squad. It's about utilize. That's what I spoke with Alex Goldberg about, and I'm sure you've said it on the byline and spoke to him about as well. It's about what position do you best optimize in N'Golo Kante.
Exactly.
I think if we're being honest, a lone DM is probably not that area based on the evidence of his career. If you look at his career, he's never played as that whole DM. He's always played in a pair. You think about the title-winning season under Antonio Conte, he was alongside another DM in the Nemanja Matic, and that allowed Matic sitting a little bit deeper. It allowed Kante to, sort of get up the pitch a little bit more and do what he does best, be sort of two players at once, and that's the concern at the moment. I think Burnley was a brilliant game for the 4-3-3 because it allowed us a lot of space. We weren't up against a team who had rapid speed on the break, who could hit us.
Yeah.
When we play against Tottenham, it's going to be, Son, Bale, Harry Kane. That's the big litmus test, isn't it? Not only for the
another level.
Kante,
It's another level.
Well, it's another level. And then you can maybe make a judgment, right? If that's the formation. But it seems it's still at the moment, isn't it, with Rice, all the links to Rice, that no matter what happens in the short term, Chelsea are going to go out and try and sign Declan Rice because they see him as the long-term number 6. And I agree with you on Ethan Ampadu. I'm a little bit concerned about Ampadu, to be honest, because I don't want to see him let go, because I think we've got an incredible talent there potentially.
Yeah, same. I mean, look, if they can find the thing is with Rice is he's a player that's improved rapidly over the last couple of years. When I saw him, when I think Hazard and Loftus-Cheek really did spin him at Stamford Bridge a couple of years ago under Sarri, and I was looking at the player like, wow, he's got a lot of improvement to do in that role, and not even mobility wise, but just twisting and turning with those low gravity sensor players, and obviously Loftus-Cheek, who was just a powerhouse that season at the back end. He's got a lot of work to do, and he's really come leaps and bounds. The issue really isn't Rice, because I do feel like regardless, I've come around a lot on the player. It's still not a player I would sign personally. It's not my target, but he's certainly a player that's going to improve. He's got the right mentality. He's got the fundamentals and the qualities that you look for. And I think he's a player that's going to prove worth around maybe £50 million if you was to invest that now. My issue right now is that we have Gilmour, who let's get onto now as well, plus Ampadu. Gilmour, as you said, played really well in that base against Everton and Liverpool. Man the match performances both times, I believe. Roy Keane speaking, singing on Sky Sports lyricals about Billy Gilmour, and that doesn't happen with Roy Keane very often. So that's how you know we have a very special player on our hands. My issue is, where does he come into this? Because as you said, Kante, has looked really good in a double pivot in his whole career. Now he's been switched to a lone DM. He's on huge wages, by the way. So if he's staying, that's someone that if he's going to play lone DM, you're expecting him to command a lot of minutes for that. Rice costs a lot of money. You'd expect him to command a lot of minutes. And Ampadu, for me, and Gilmour are not going to command those kind of minutes. Yes, they are very talented individuals, but they're also very young. I think if they was to come into the first team, obviously Gilmour's already here. Ampadu next season, I don't think they're going to put so much. I'm not calling it unhealthy competition, because you can't have too many good players, but in that position, you do look for structure, and you don't really look for rotation the same way you do in the attackers. So I do feel like those two players, Billy and Ampadu, are a little bit more suited to the role of deputising for Kante, if that is the plan. But what do you think of Gilmour and the potential future there?
I think firstly, you have to say he's coming back from an injury, so I think there needs to be that patience there for him to get back to his best fitness, and I'm sure they're going to manage him wisely. I don't think you can rule out Gilmour getting back into this team. I think that Frank, he was almost forced to do it in a sense, because if you cast your mind back to March, we had an injury crisis basically, and I remember we had almost 7 first-team players out. So it almost forced Frank's hand in a sense, because you're looking at all the players who could have played in that lone DM role or in defensive midfield. He didn't have a lot of options at the time. But it worked so well, and it gave us that sort of balance. You can instantly see the balance in that team, and it was 2 brilliant back-to-back performances where Chelsea, almost the performances we've seen recently, where we looked solid in defence. We weren't giving away many shots. That Liverpool game, I think, is one of the best performances under Lampard in terms of the FA Cup. And, some of the players in that game, are not really first-team players, are they? There was rotation in that game too. But Gilmour, it's hard to know. I think you have to balance that with what he did post-lockdown. Because when he played post-lockdown, I don't know if this is because Kante was put back into the midfield, because Kante was injured at the time when Gilmour came in.
Of course.
Them getting in the way. I mean, at Leicester first half in the FA Cup, you don't want to go too hard on a young player, and I'm not, ruling him out or anything like that. he looked a lot more his age in post-lockdown than he did pre-lockdown. And I think that's what fans have to be patient with, that you're going to get that with such a young player. I agree with you. This is the issue Chelsea have in a lot of areas, and especially midfield is the most congested area of Chelsea's pitch, right? In terms of, even letting Barkley and Ruben go on loan, it's still massively, it's still so competitive. And there's players out on loan at the moment, like Conor Gallagher, that you think, will he ever come back? Tino Angerin, we've heard chats that Lampard may want to utilize him in some way. So how are all these players going to play? That's the issue. Not all of them are going to make it, right? And that's the issue. And the problem is with Gilmour, it's not when we talk about Reece and Dave earlier, that's good competition because Dave is a player coming to the end of his career. He's done his hard yards. He's got the medals in the bank. It's fine. I think he's happy to probably retire at Chelsea or maybe return to Spain. For maybe a couple of years, as we've seen with Pedro. Right? Not the same with Billy Gilmour and Ethan Ampadu. These are two players who need to be playing football now. They just can't be sitting on the bench. Yeah, and that's the issue, right? And it's when I get to that stage that I'm concerned about not so much Gilmour, because Gilmour's been in the eye of Frank Lampard. Frank Lampard's played him. I think he'll get a chance. I think he will. I think he'll get off the bench probably at some point in the coming weeks, maybe off the bench in a Champions League game because you get 5 subs in that competition. But the issue is when Gilmour plays, you think about what is that doing to Ampadu in a sense as well. I think I still get a feeling in the back of my mind that we could see loan DM, not Ethan Ampadu, maybe in the future, but loan DM Billy Gilmour. I think we could see that at some point in this season, whether that's going to be a main thing. This is the problem with Lampard, right? And we're starting maybe to see consistency and certainty, which is what we've wanted for over a year. But the issue is, as we've seen with Lampard, until we get it for about 10 to 15 to 20 games, it's hard to know if in 2 games' time we're back to a 3-4-3, we're back to a 4-2-3-1, and then suddenly we bring Jorginho and Kovacic back into the conversation.
I'm learning to be a little bit more coy with my analysis with Chelsea because I've committed so much of my heart to so much, and I've just continuously spun and changed around. And it's like a washing machine out here. Like I can only do this dance so many times with Chelsea where I think I know what's going on, and then boom, next thing you know, it cuts and it changes to something else, and I look like an idiot. So I'm going to be a little bit more coy, lads. If you're not used to it, get used to it. Yeah. Brilliant comment here. Obviously a change of formation. First of all, guys, thank you so much for the comments. This is my first live stream on this channel. You guys are doing brilliant in the comments. Really great chat. I see so many other live chats on football. They just mess about and they just spam the chat with rubbish. You guys are putting in some really good comments. Keep them coming in. I really, really appreciate it. This formation that you brought up, really good formation. I remember we played it under Carlo Ancelotti, I believe, and we played a 4-4-2 diamond. We had Malouda in the cam, I believe. Lampard was just below that, and you had I think a Drogba and Nelco type partnership up front. I believe that was the combination that was struck when we had that really great season where we scored so many goals. The reason, and I'll get Daniel's take on this now, the reason why I don't see this happening is because, like I said earlier, I don't know if Lampard can coach this. He's not used to playing in this formation. Obviously he played it under Carlo, but he's used to playing in a 3. I think he likes the 3-man midfield. Obviously him as a player, that's when it really got the best out of him, allowed him to drive into the box. And if you're teaching the likes of Kai Havertz, who we're going to get onto now, Mason Mount as well, how to drive into the box, score those goals at the edge of the area, if you're going to train them to do that, the best formation to do that is in a 4-3-3, not in a diamond, because in a diamond, those central midfielders really have to actually go wide sometimes to cover the fullbacks because you are playing 2 strikers and you are playing a cam. So it's a really good idea. I do like it. Obviously, it does get quite a lot of our attackers into the game. Obviously, Werner, it gets next to Tammy or Giroud, which allows Werner to play that second striker, which I do think he's best at. But I just don't think it will happen because of the dynamic of our midfield will have to change. I know it's still 3 in midfield, but those midfielders with no wingers then have to do a different job. And I don't think that's going to work as well. So really good suggestion, but I personally don't see it happening. Moving on to Mount and Havertz. Let's do these 2 as a combo because Daniel, I've been waiting for this moment. Christian Falk, I have to air him out here to dry. He said that Mason Mount was disappointed with the signing of Kai Havertz, I believe, because he was afraid or not happy with the competition. What a load of bollocks. What do you make of this partnership? I saw the arm around the shoulder. These 2 look like they're best pals. They're going to get along great and they complement each other really well.
I have to sort of give myself credit here because I did a predicted 11 before the season kicked off, and my midfield 3 was N'Golo Kante, Kai Havertz, and Mason Mount. And I really hope that stays the way it is because it's really exciting, for Mason and for Kai to play together, to get both of them in the team. I think, starting with Mason, this guy, I said at the start of the season, he will make his way into this team. He will get on the pitch for Frank Lampard, because he did last season, right? He got over 50 appearances. And I've seen a lot of nonsense on social media about him and really toxic stuff. And what you saw against Burnley was, this is much more than just a pressing player. This is much more than just a utility part. This is a guy who has technique, who has guile, who has vision on the ball. The way he switched the ball, and he did it, even, it wasn't as exemplary a performance against Rennes, just generally for Chelsea. He still did it at times against Rennes, switching the ball. When you're playing against a low block, you need to do that. And it was almost perfect. He gets the assist for the Zuma header from the corner. All round Mason against Burnley, I think he silenced a lot of people there in terms of, this is a serious player. Don't underrate him. Don't think that this guy is just going to be thrown to the side, because Lampard rates him. And I've said this at the start of the season as well. These new players are only going to excel the likes of and really upgrade the games, I think, of the young players we have, if their mentality is right. And you spoke about mentality earlier. The mentality of Mason Mount is, I'm going to, rise to this, challenge right here. I see all these new players coming in. I have to raise my game. I think it's the same with Reece James. I think it's the same with Tammy Abraham. You're seeing now. Tammy's like, all right, I'm going to fight for my place now. I'm going to earn my place now. And you're going to have to put me in the team again. That's what you want from these young players. And Mason encapsulates all of that. It's just horrible, the opening weeks of the season, the amount of abuse he got. And I'm always someone to oppose it. And I just think it looks more ludicrous when you see performances like that against Burnley. And I don't know why Chelsea fans, I think the majority of Chelsea fans appreciate Mason Mount, right? I think it's a vocal minority, a toxic minority on Twitter, right? I think the majority of match-going supporters, the majority of people who I'm sure are watching this video appreciate Mason Mount, right? You may not think he's, sometimes wasted as a right winger like we saw so far this season. But I think, Mount said it himself after the Burnley game, I'm a number 8. I'm a central midfielder. And I think that's where he's going to be playing a lot more under Lampard.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think Mason Mount doesn't pick himself, guys. You have to remember that. So if he's playing right wing or he's playing number 10 or left wing, that's not due to his decision. He's playing the game and he's playing where Lampard is asking him to be picked. So if you have any question marks, you really take that up with Frank Lampard, in my opinion. Well, the thing I've always said with Mason is that, one, I do feel like he was overplayed last season, maybe because his endurance is so high, but that caused him to have niggling injuries and not show the potential that I saw at Vitesse. A real baller, to be honest. At Vitesse, he really did have a great season there, put up great numbers that we applaud some of our counterparts for. And the thing is with Mount is, I've always asked, can he play in his strongest position, please? Because when he is playing in the number 8, as we saw against Burnley, his whole game just changes. He's in a lot deeper position, which I think suits him a lot more. It allows him to get on the ball. And the thing is, he doesn't hog it. He moves it quickly. He does this really nice thing where he runs into his stride, lets the ball come into his stride. He doesn't take too many touches, which Alex really well spotted on the byline again as well, who obviously watches him very closely. And his switch of plays, those out balls to Reece that you mentioned, really, really well. And obviously a great corner kick as well. How long have we been waiting for a great set piece to come into the box so we can hopefully utilize it? Zuma getting on the end of it. I think that's Zuma's 3rd goal of the season. Really, really great header. And that gave me JT vibes, I can't lie. And the more of that, the better. So if Mount's going to play for me, it's got to be in the number 8. I understand utilizing him at the wing. I think that's why it's taken until Ziyech has come into the team for him to stop playing on the wing for that defensive balance. I think Frank tried that a lot with Willian last year as well. He really does rate and respect that defensive balance. I'm fine with it as long as you get the attacking output in that right wing spot as well, which Ziyech does bring, which Mount really, for me, didn't bring to his best. He's not really a right winger, and Willian, of course, his numbers were always quite dodgy throughout his Chelsea career. So on an attacking standpoint, so I'm just glad that Ziyech has now come into this team, and that allows Mount to play where he should be playing, and long may it continue. And like I said, Mount's a very young player. Sometimes he's going to need a rest. I hope Lampard does manage him a bit more, because I know he's got high endurance, but like I said, I do only really want to see Mount at his best. I don't want to see him, scapegoated for these utility positions. He's not a utility player. I know he'll go out there and do a job in other positions, but he's much more talented than we give him credit for. And I think if we didn't have so many surging youngsters coming through the squad, we'd probably rate him a lot more. But because we have so many different to choose from, you have Gilmore, you have Hudson-Odoi, who are probably more talented naturally. You got Reece James as well. That allows us maybe to undermine Mount when we shouldn't. If we only had Mount coming through, we'd probably be like, wow, this is something to invest in. He's a very young kid. So hopefully he's managed a bit better. And I think him and Kovacic could have a good rotation there. depending on the game, if obviously Kovacic can get back to his form, which I'm sure he can, because he's a player that I rate very highly, and a lot of the people in the chat do as well. Going further forward, quickly, Kai Havertz. I mean, great comment here. Bruno needs to come outside because King Kai is influencing games without stat padding. And it's so true. And I spoke about this on Rance's channel earlier. You know, Bruno obviously has been taking a lot of penalties and getting his stats up. Kai, not so much. But Kai, if you just watch the game, he is doing really good work. Not just attacking-wise, Daniel, but defensively. How great has he been, you know, at tracking back defensively?
I mean, it was our opening game of the season, wasn't it, against Brighton, where it was, I think we were 2-1 or 3-1 up, and he chased back, lost the ball on the halfway line and chased back all the way into his own penalty area, won the ball back. And his tackling has been, you know, as good. I think in terms of surprising, you know, a surprising element of his game. You think when he came in, it's all about the flair, it's all about the assists, it's all about the late runs into the box. But I think that's a good thing to have, you know, in your team, especially a team that wants to be on the front foot. You know, that sort of press that we saw against Burnley, where anytime Chelsea lost the ball, you'd see Kai, you'd see Tammy pressing up hard, and that's what Lampard wants. And I think Kai's giving that. You know, Kai hasn't been exceptional, but I think there needs to be an understanding of, this is still a young player. This is not like a Ziyech. This is not a guy in the prime of his career. This is a guy who's still going to have to find his feet in the Premier League. But at the same time, I think there's delicate parts of his game that you just see the quality within there. You see the anticipation, you see the vision within there, the game intelligence that's only going to improve as he gets more chemistry with the players, his new teammates, basically. And I did a video on this in terms of people saying he's had a slow start to the season. And it was analysis on his Bayer Leverkusen career that he always got stronger in the second half of the year. You know, he in terms of numbers, he'd always improve post-Christmas. Of course, we don't have a Christmas break in the Premier League in a massive way like they do in Germany, but I think that's a good thing to think about, that by February, March, April time, he could be really on top form. But he hasn't been bad, has he? You know, none of our new signings have been poor. I think Kai's definitely sometimes struggled maybe with... I also think, you know, just resting him, you know, managing, you know, other than the Spurs League Cup game, he started and played a majority of every game so far this season. And that's something you've got to think about as well. You know, Frank's played him a lot of time so far this season, but that game against Burnley, other games, other moments as well, he's shown that quality, and I think that's only going to improve. So I think you've got to be pleased with what Kai's doing so far. You know, I think that it's only going to get better from here. This is not a short-term signing. This is a long-term investment. This is an Eden Hazard investment for the next, hopefully, 7 to 8 years. So there's a long way to go for Kai, and the only direction, you know, is up at the moment, you know, in terms of Kai and what he can do at Chelsea.
100%. And a really good comment here as well in terms of the 3-4-3 formation, which we saw utilized a lot last season. I went to that Tottenham game. Thank God. It was my first away game that I went to. I was ecstatic. Dad managed to get me tickets for that and we won. William got a double, and honestly, probably one of the best days of my life. I ain't even going to lie. I mean, beating Tottenham at the Toilet Bowl, it does not get better than that. You never forget those moments, right? Them leaving the ground early and us just singing our hearts out. What would you do with these specialist games, so to speak? Because like this comment says, we have a track record, almost a template against Tottenham to go off in a 3-4-3. You can speak about Wolves as well, potentially as well, when we come up against them. Would you change formation for these type of games, or would you just stick with what we've got?
I guess we have to find out, don't we? I mean, Man United, that's one there. If he does it again against Spurs, I think you could start to think that, yeah, he's starting to do this for big games. You know, he's starting to be a bit more pragmatic for these games. And that very much ties into the midfield conversation, right? It matters what's happening around the game, what he feels about it. This Tottenham team is better than the one last year. You know, they're not going to be playing, unless they have a massive injury crisis between now and the game, they're not going to have no strikers on the pitch. You know, that's going to be the case for Chelsea. And it's about limiting those transitions. The sort of the connectivity between Harry Kane and Son at the moment is incredible. I mean, in terms of, it's almost record breaking at the moment. And there's got to be an understanding there. I wouldn't be stunned if the 3-4-3 is used again, because it's a formation that has worked. It's never, when people call for it to be a long-term formation, that's never going to work, because I just saw it so many times last season. Frank would surprise us with it. It worked really well. It looked really good. And then he tried literally in the next game. We never won back-to-back games with the 3-4-3 last season.
Yeah.
And I think
I know exactly what you're referring to. Southampton, I think, was the same. Yeah, we lost.
there were other examples as well throughout the season. We played against Wolves and then we lost to Valencia at home in the Champions League. So he done it several times and it never worked consistently. That's not the same with the 4-2-3-1 and especially the 4-3-3. So I think that's the main thing there. I would be stunned, Frank, although he lost, in the League Cup to Jose, has a 100% record against Jose in the Premier League. It's going to be a big game. I think Frank will see it as a massive opportunity to put a statement down there. Because based on the way that game may shape up, based on the form of both teams, it could almost be a top of the table clash, in late November. So it's a big game for Chelsea. And I'm just intrigued because you could look at it both ways, right? Frank, I think, done the right thing against Man United because we need to provide that stable base and grow. I could see what was being done there just to add some assurance to that defense after the Southampton game, which was absolutely crazy. You can't have that happening every week. You can't be conceding 3 goals like that. So it's going to be intriguing. I just wonder sometimes when he does that, is he sort of compromising and limiting his attacking players, his attacking vision? You want to see Chelsea go out there in one of these big games. And that was the thing with the 3-4-3 last season against Spurs both times, is those were not defensive performances. Those were performances where Chelsea went out there, took the game to Spurs and really broke them down and really, I think made Mourinho's style of football look pretty old. The problem is this year they've improved in key areas. So it's going to be, and maybe that means there'll be more space on the day with the type of players they have. So it's going to be a big game, I think, in terms of gauging where we are. And I think that Lampard's decision making, does he stick to his principles? Does he be brave, or does he maybe think, let's be a bit more pragmatic, let's have that solid base there and then try and get our best attacking players on the counter? Maybe I don't know, we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, we'll save that for the preview to the game, but really good comment and really, really good to get our heads thinking about that, because that's going to be a really interesting tactical battle. I think obviously Tottenham with their front three, we've now got to pay respect, but not too much respect because we have our own attacking threats now. So it's going to be interesting, that matchup. Moving on to the final front six, and obviously the last part of this squad breakdown, we'll start with Hakim Ziyech. This is a player that I am swallowing the pill and I'm doing it with grace because I'm so happy to see what he's doing on the pitch for us. Literally, I think I did a whole big apology video on Twitter and it went down quite well. This guy is just doing wonders for us. And the thing is with Hakim Ziyech is he's making such a big difference, not even just going forward, but again, defensively, he is showing that awareness. He's tracking runners. And he obviously, I remember an instance where he tracked a runner against Rennes, obviously committed the foul outside the box, but I was happy with that because conceding wide free kicks and corners is no issue to me now. Like the way we defend is so good. It's just great to see him aware to actually track the runner and not let them loose. What have you made of him? He's probably been one of our top players with the least amount of game time. Yeah,
I mean, I think just on that defensive point, it brings up the idea of him potentially playing as a number 8. If Frank wants to use him there, if you want that defensive solidity there as well and balance. But, he's been very impressive. I think first 2 starts for Chelsea, 2 goals, matching. The last player to do that was Diego Costa. So amazing company to be in, especially personally for me, as Diego is one of my favorite ever Chelsea players. So great start for Hakim Ziyech. He's a very different type of winger that we're used to at Chelsea over recent years. He's a much more elegant, graceful, calm winger. When he gets the ball, there's nothing. He's not a Christian Pulisic. He's not going to get the ball and put his head down and just sprint, for meters and meters and just go and go and go. He's someone that is going to take his time. He's going to be a bit more of a craftsman, on that pitch. And as you saw last night, he's sort of average position. Of course, he starts on the right, but he does naturally drift into a central role, which I think is good because it drags defenders. It allows space for Reece to get onto the right. We saw that with the third goal. I mean, everything we've been craving this season in terms of that Reece and Hakim Ziyech combo we saw in that third goal last night. And it's going to work a treat. I think you've got to be impressed. I just think it's still very early, isn't it? It's a bit frustrating that we haven't seen him sooner, to be honest, because what he's added to the team in terms of goal scoring, in terms of creativity, you can already see a player there that he's going to do serious things, and unlike Kai, he's at the prime of his career. He's been there, done it. He knows what his game is. He feels very comfortable, I'm sure, in his skin now in terms of the type of player he is. So you're not sort of dealing with a player who's still finding out maybe his best position, dealing with setbacks and the natural things that players deal with in their career. So serious player, going to do serious things for Chelsea. He's going to add a dynamic to our attack that I think is going to be very hard to defend against.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm loving the arrogance that he shows as well on the ball. Like that is something that there's a fine line between arrogance and ego. And he's got the right blend because he wants to get on the ball. And I actually want him to get on the ball a lot more, whether that's him dropping deeper and allowing Kai to actually advance, because Kai next to Timo, they've got a very good attacking relationship with Germany. Obviously, Kai's almost built up a little relationship with Hudson-Odoi when they've had cameos as well. And I think if you're going to pick a player to go a bit deeper and make those long range passes that we were hoping that Jorginho would make earlier on in the show, Ziyech is that guy to make that crossfield ball to the back post, to make those deeper, maybe Fabregas-esque kind of attempt passes and see if he can pull those type of passes off. Because if he can, that's going to give us a new dynamic in midfield as well. If he can slot in and interchange with Kai, who's very, very comfortable drifting in those half spaces in the right channel, whether it's out on the wide or even as a false nine as well.
Can I just say, with that sort of, once again, with Reece, it's a difficult thing, for a defence. If I'm a defence setting up to try and limit Chelsea's attack at the moment, and Hakim Ziyech gets on the ball on his left foot on the right, cutting in, what do you do? Because this is a guy with his left foot that can put in a ball, as we saw against Burnley, that's impossible to defend against. But at the same time, if you back off him or you really press him, he's got the mobility and skill to get past you. You commit a foul, but also he could potentially find Reece, who then, when you get the ball to Reece, we know what Reece can do. So it's just, delivery on that side is absolutely immense. And I think it's going to be very difficult for teams to counteract that, because you can't stop all of our players at once. And it's who do you prioritize in terms of, and sometimes, as you've said, Ziyech won't be coming in from the right. He may be coming in from a little bit deeper or a more central role. And then that changes once again, and you're dealing with other sort of positions that Ziyech will take up. So the versatility in this player and sort of the movement of this player is so exciting. And it's just, once again, a signing that you just think it is going to prove so beneficial to Chelsea, and it's going to offer us a creativity we haven't seen for a long time. So I think he's just a wonderful player to watch. He's a player you want to pay to watch, and watch regularly. He's a box office player. He's going to give you those compilations that you could watch at the end of the season. But as you've stated as well, he's got that work rate that's really good for a team.
Yeah, double trouble, as I like to call it, with him and Reece James. They've obviously built up quite a chemistry as well. Moving on to Pulisic, great comment here, because it is a little concern of mine, and I want to get your thoughts on it as well, Daniel. He's picking up quite a lot of injuries, and it's not even big ones, it's niggling ones that just continue to keep cropping up every couple of months almost. What are your thoughts on him and his longevity in his career? Because it is starting to get worrying, because the player's ability, take the injuries out of it, is probably one of the most dangerous wingers in this league. But if he continues to get these injuries, it's a problem, isn't it?
I think he can, if he stays fit, and this is the big if, isn't it? I think he's our best player, and I think he can be our player of the season. The problem is, how many times is he going to get it onto the pitch? And it is concerning, he's pulling up before a game. Thank God Frank turned round on Tuesday before the game and said, it's very minor, he's back out in training. I think that's the first time Frank turned around about an injury sort of update and said it wasn't the worst case scenario. So maybe our luck's turning on that. We'll have to sort of see how he deals with this and what Frank does. He's been named in the US squad over the international break. Does he feature against Sheffield United? I don't suspect him to start. It'll be intriguing to see what Lampard does in terms of selection, because to me, I know people, and we'll get to him in terms of Hudson-Odoi, but I can't, if Pulisic is ready for a game, it's hard for me to not put him in the starting 11. Yeah, because he's just, even if he's not scoring, I think what he offers, once again, as we were saying with Ziyech and his attacking players, in the minor defenders, there's so much to deal with Pulisic, and his anticipation for goals is the one thing I stress about him. I think it's his biggest weapon in terms of scoring goals, being in the right place at the right time in the box, that you just hope he stays fit. I'd be disingenuous if I said I'm not concerned by these injuries, because it could be really detrimental when Chelsea can't rely on a player that gets injured every couple of weeks. It's going to really dent his career and take, injuries take a toll on players over a period of time. Let's just fingers crossed, right? But the unfortunate thing is, it's to an area he's just got injured, recently, and that's the concern. If you keep on getting an injury over and over again in the same area, you're concerned if that's going to be a thing that's just going to dent his career throughout the entirety of it. And it's something some players have, don't they? Diego Costa had a hamstring problem throughout his career.
He did.
And you can't really get away from that. So we'll have, fingers crossed, because he's an incredible talent. He really is.
Yeah, really great points there. There's been some top players that we've had that have had injury problems, but you just have to manage it and try and get the most games out of them for the season. And luckily, we do have depth in his position. Going on to Hudson-Odoi, it's a very up and down time for him. This is a player that you could really do a whole stream on. So we won't speak on everything to do with Hudson-Odoi in his whole Chelsea first team career, but just on right now. Where do you see him right now? Because obviously it's a sticky one.
It is. It's hard. I wrote a piece for the CFC UK fanzine a couple months ago about this and this whole sort of buying situation and why timing I think is so important for young players. And breaking into the team when he did under Sarri, it was a bit like I think him and Ruben had similar trajectories at the time. You know, Callum would have started that Europa League final in sort of a different timeline. So it's been difficult for him. I think in the moments he's got so far this season, I think generally he's looked promising. I think the Krasnodar game, I think he really did take his opportunity and he was getting in some interesting positions. I think it sounds bad, but, you know, that Pulisic injury could have worked for Hudson-Odoi. You know, it could have been the thing that brought him back into the team because Pulisic's not injured that drastically now. And it looks like Frank will favour playing Timo out left because he can the strongest team, he'll shift Timo out there because he knows he can do it, especially with Tammy playing in the centre. That's going to be an issue for Hudson-Odoi. So where does Hudson-Odoi fit? It's a big thing. It's hard to know with Hudson-Odoi where this is going to head because are Bayern going to give up? You know, they've had 2 attempts to try and sign him. I don't sense Bayern are a team that are just going to let this die. And if Hudson-Odoi is still on the periphery of the team, there could be they could come calling again in January, and we never know if that will be the thing that, you know, knocks it over the line and the deal finally gets done. There's a quality player there. There's no doubt about it, right? But I have found just on this, and I don't want to drag on because, you know, in terms of, you said this is a subject I've spoken about a lot on my channel and, you know, we could speak about a lot, but
for sure.
I do find it a bit much when I hear comments about Lampard and Lampard should be playing Hudson-Odoi. What is he doing not playing Hudson-Odoi week in, week out? You know, he should have been playing him more last season. And I just think that's disingenuous because the context is everything, right? Was he getting in front of Willian and Pedro at the back end of last season? No, and he shouldn't have been because both of those players were in top form. Willian was putting up creative numbers as good as Bruno Fernandes at the end of last season. So no, Willian and Pulisic were going to be the first team players this season so far. If Ziyech is the thing, everyone wants, you know, I want Havertz in the team. I want Ziyech in the team. I want Pulisic in the team. Not all these players can play, right? So someone's got to get sacrificed. And that's unfortunately the thing for Callum at the moment. The noise is going to be there and I don't think it's going to go away. It's a difficult situation for him at the moment, and I just wonder once again, will that injury against Burnley define his Chelsea career? It's a sad thing to say and to think about. He's such a young player and such an exceptional talent that can do so much in a game, but you just once again wonder with timing, like Marcus Rashford breaking into Man United, you know, at that time, you know, it was perfect scenario for him. Harry Kane at Tottenham, perfect scenario for him. Injuries to the first team. I don't know if there's going to be a perfect time again for Callum Hudson-Odoi.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly, and it is a concern of mine because I don't feel like it's the same situation that we had with Pulisic last season, where he was kind of, you know, eased into the team very slowly. A lot of fans were questioning the decision from Lampard, but because, you know, Pulisic has got really a clean slate, there's no politics involved, and I think Hudson-Odoi, you'd be silly to think that there isn't some politics in terms of, you know, him, you know, obviously breaking down lockdown rules. You've got the transfer request, you've got Bayern Munich's interest, which is huge. You cannot underestimate how big Bayern Munich's interest is in a factor with what Chelsea and how they deal with Hudson-Odoi. Obviously, they came with a loan bid. Chelsea were looking for an obligation to buy, I think, of around 70 million. If they did get that, I think, and if they got that bid earlier with the obligation to buy, I think they would have actually taken it and got a Benrahma or someone who's a little bit more suited to a squad role instead of a young player who needs game time. Listen, the chat has been brilliant. Just to catch up with you guys, thank you so much for leaving your comments. If you are commenting about defenders, we have obviously gone through that already, but I am clicking on the comments and obviously just putting you up on the screen just to let you know that we have seen it. I'm putting in the link to Daniel's channel as well, Son of Chelsea. So if you see that in the chat, I've just put it in there. Please do subscribe to his channel.
One of the comments, I didn't say Pedro, it was Willian.
Yes.
Sorry if I said Pedro, I meant obviously Willian was I'm pretty sure I said Willian. Willian was playing better than Hudson-Odoi at the time, and you know Willian should have been playing. So that's the point I was making.
Yeah, 100%. And here, like I said, subscribe to his channel. I'm going to put the link in the description as well, of course, for this video. Now, going on to the strikers. we've got three strikers. We're blessed in this position. Three top strikers, I think we can say as well. We'll start with Timo Werner because obviously he got 2 goals in midweek. Great for him to be on penalties. I think, first of all, credit to Jorginho, mature, professional, vice captain. This is the kind of mentality that I spoke about earlier in the show, why I love this player. He doesn't make a fuss. He hands them over. And I like the pecking order that was established. I respect it. When Tammy tried to take it, and Aspilicueta obviously reminded him of the rules. But Jorginho has missed 2 this season. I think Timo's in well within his rights to get them now. So I was happy to see that turnover. And obviously just Timo in general, 10 goals and assists. Goal contributions in 11 games this season. Obviously, he's drawn penalties. He's had a really positive influence despite playing in 2 different positions and maybe not even adapting to English football completely yet. What have you made of the player?
I think you always had to, there was always going to be a transition period. I think there was always going to be early struggles with him because this is not a Diego Costa, right? And I think in recent times, that's, I think, the benchmark in terms of signing a striker, right? In terms of someone who came in and looked like he was playing for Chelsea for years and years. I think the thing with Timo is he's a very different type of striker to anyone we've had before, especially in recent years. And I think there was always going to be that time where he had to adapt and Lampard had to figure out how to optimize him the best, because you can't. The issue I think in summer games recently where you're playing him and the type of, long balls up towards him, it's not going to work, because he's not a Tammy, he's not a Giroud, he's not your typical Chelsea striker of the last 15 years who can play with his back to goal. That's not how Timo succeeds. I think it's nice that you do have Timo, the versatility within Timo to play wide, and you can play a Tammy who can deal with the physical game a bit more, and it allows Timo the space, as we saw against Rennes, to win penalties. I think you've got to be impressed. It's not been exhilarating, but that's not me undermining his goal contribution so far. I mean, it's been impressive, right? I just think, once again, with no preseason, I think that was always going to dent new players coming in. And we saw against Southampton, when he gets space, this guy is, very, very dangerous, very dangerous. And I think just, even the Burnley game, I think he signed a great striker. Burnley game, he didn't have a good game that day. Mostly every time he touched the ball, it was bobbling off against his foot. He wasn't really getting into the game, but he gets his one chance finally and he scores it. And that's what you want from a striker, right? So I think he's only going to get better. I think, once again, a bit like the Kai situation, it can only go up from here, but it's not been terrible. This is, if you wanted a mediocre start with a player who's already, how many goals do you say already this season? That's a good return, basically. And he's not hit, he's not hit top form. So I think that's good.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like the 10 goal contributions in 11 games, and we're still saying we haven't seen the best of Timo yet. Obviously, his first touch, I think, has let him down sometimes. That's something that can definitely improve. And as this comment says, definitely he's made some runs as a striker. I have seen him, watched him individually on the pitch make that darting run, make the show for the ball in behind, but we haven't spotted him, and then it's continued to circulate. So that's something that we obviously need to get right. And I think, as I said earlier, I think Ziyech will really help with that. If he can drift into that RCM spot and interchange with Kai, both of them have good vision and good accuracy with their passing. So if they can start getting their head up and making those crossfield balls, it really does. These signings, what I'll say from Frank Lampard quickly, these signings complement each other so well if they can get ticking. The creators on the right side now, and the potent off the ball runners on the left. You've got your finishers in Pulisic and Werner. You've got your creators who can make those crossfield balls across the pitch in Kai and Ziyech. I think that's a recipe for disaster. So I'm really disaster for opposition, by the way, not for us. And I'm really impressed with that. The recruitment fits, and we haven't been able to say that too often for Chelsea. That one buy makes sense next to another buy, and everything kind of goes together, and you can see the puzzle they're trying to put together. Sometimes the signings have looked very individual, which I haven't liked over the years. Moving on to Sir Tammy. Yeah. This guy, his goal contribution to minutes ratio is ridiculous. I don't know exactly what it is, but I've heard some around 50 to 60 minutes, he's producing something for us, and he's getting assists as well. That's the area of his game. He's a goal getter. The only thing I'd say that he would take him to the next level, I've mentioned before, is his heading ability. If he can start going towards those Calvert-Lewin levels in the trajectory, the timing of his headers, and really nail that, then he's going to get goals from those situations as well. But he's starting to really get assists, which I like. The link-up play over the weekend for Ziyech was great. Obviously, he gets a goal, finally getting on the end of a Reece James cross, which was fully deserved for Reece. He deserves an assist and far more so far in his Chelsea first team career. What have you made of Tammy? Because obviously he leapfrogged Giroud straight away in the pecking order.
Yeah, I think Tammy's been brilliant. I think people have forgotten what Tammy did last season. He was our top goal scorer last season, and I think people underestimated that, probably because he struggled in the second half of the season, and Giroud became the main striker as we got to the final part of the season. And Giroud did incredible things for Chelsea, scoring so many big goals. But you cannot forget what Tammy did at the first part of the season, scoring some big goals. And I'm happy for Tammy because I think he's been underrated, written off. And I think what you're seeing here is his all-round play improving. What was amazing about that pass and that layoff to Ziyech was the first time I saw it against Burnley, I thought he'd overhit it and put Hakim in a sort of an awkward position. When you rewatch the goal from a different angle, it's a perfect layoff. It's just a lovely little tap back there in a tight area and sets up his team well. And if your striker, this is the thing why Batshuayi never succeeded at Chelsea, because your striker cannot just be a goal scorer, right? We want them to be a goal scorer. That's their main job, right? And I know that sounds stupid to say that their main job isn't to be a goal scorer, but to be a Chelsea striker at an elite level, you have to have that other element to your game of hold-up play, of linking with fellow attackers, of making intelligent moves in terms of winning fouls when your team's under pressure. Tammy has that, and that's why he's going to stay in the team. Especially, you have Havertz out, you have Pulisic potentially not ready for Saturday. You got to be happy with Tammy's start. Look at the team against Burnley. Look at the team against Rennes. Do you really think Frank's going to change that radically? I expect Tammy to be up there once again, and it's testament to the character of Tammy Abraham and the mentality that he's backed himself. I'm going to get into this team. Don't you worry. I back myself to be a Chelsea striker, and you never know with this team. He may be a main player. If Timo really excels on the left and Pulisic continues to struggle with fitness, Tammy may be our main striker once again. He may not have as many goals as last season, and he may become a bit more of a Firmino type player in the sense that he's a bit more elevating the games behind him. But happy days, right? He's getting minutes at Chelsea Football Club.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the thing is with Tammy, I keep saying this, he didn't cost a penny. Do you know what I mean? For us to have this option, whether it's first choice up front in the recent games or second choice, to have this option of a player that can still continue to develop, as I've mentioned earlier, there's so many areas of his game I think can still improve. To have a player of this ability at this age, English as well, that comes with an extra tax. To have that in the squad is something that we should definitely appreciate a lot more, because he is used to getting goals no matter where he goes in his career. Aston Villa, obviously, before on loan as well, he's got his goals to show for it. So he's someone at a young age who is used to banging in goals, and he's clearly got a drive to score goals and a hunger to get goals. And we've certainly got regardless of whether you think he's starting material in the biggest games, I can understand why you would think he's not, but just to have him around, that's priceless for me, because it's very difficult to get second choice strikers in this day and age to even play second fiddle to any top team. And moving on to Giroud, finally, he's the last player on the list. Of course, he's getting barely any game time, and he obviously came on in midweek as well against Rennes, and he didn't have the greatest game, I have to say. He missed a few opportunities as well, maybe potentially again not getting the game time, so he's looking rusty. What have you made of him? Because obviously he starts for France.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to go off international duty. He's going to score a few more goals for France because that's what he does. I feel so, you got to feel sorry for Giroud, man. He was incredible at the back end of last season. He really was. I think there were some Arsenal fans saying, he was never this good for us. At the back end of last season for Chelsea, he scored some big goals in big occasions, and he done everything you wanted him to do at the time. It must feel like Groundhog Day for him again, because if you remember the first part of last season, pretty much up till February, he wasn't getting a game, and Michy Batshuayi was ahead of him in the pecking order, and it must feel the same situation again. And I don't think anyone can. It's just an unfortunate situation, right? Once again, I ask people, are you going to play Olivier Giroud instead of Timo Werner? You're not, are you? In terms of long-term longevity at this club, we've invested on Timo Werner. You're going to be playing Timo Werner. It's just, Giroud's been a brilliant player for Chelsea. He's been one of our best signings in recent years when you actually think about the value of the signing and what he's given to Chelsea and how many big goals he scored for us, really. You can only be impressed by that. I'll be intrigued to see what happens in January, whether there's any movement there, but I'm still of the belief that you need to have 3 strikers within a squad. I've hated it in previous years when we've just had 2, and especially if Frank is stuck to playing Timo and Tammy at the same time, there's more risk of Timo getting injured, and one of those strikers getting injured, and you get one fit striker. So that's the issue. And Giroud's such a great player to have, because as we saw last season, he's out in the cold. He looks like he may be off, but then he becomes a very valuable player for us, and he offers something that not many strikers offer in the world of football. And when you think about the quality from crossing from Hakim Ziyech, from Ben Chilwell, from Reece James, just like Timo and Pulisic can profit off it, and Tammy can as well, we know that Giroud can too. So he may play a bigger role in a later part of the season, but I do feel sorry for him.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think a great point you made as well is that with 3 strikers, for me, you have to have that bare minimum, especially when Timo is a crossbreed between a striker and a winger, more of a second striker. And we've only got 3 real natural wingers in the club as well, in Ziyech, Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi. I think we've actually got the perfect squad competition in terms of numbers in that front 6. We've got 6 players for 3 positions, and I think that's perfect. That's exactly what you want. As soon as we get an injury like we've got with Pulisic or Kai out sick, you start to feel, okay, where's the depth in this team? And luckily we've got it. So I wouldn't get rid of Giroud in January whatsoever. I think he's a very unique player that we've got on our hands, probably one of the best target men in the world in terms of linking up with players. Hazard rated him extremely highly as well when he spoke about him and how he made his game a lot easier to play with. And as you can see for France, there's a quality player there. We don't have to remind anyone, we shouldn't have to remind anyone just what a player Giroud is on his day. Scored against, I believe, Southampton in semi-finals of FA Cups and whatnot. So he's a very talented player. And it is harsh to see him, but this is Chelsea Football Club. There's just so many options, and this is what you want: competition for places. And he's got to fight to get it back. Luckily, on our hands, we have a very professional player who's not going to kick up a storm. So I'm really excited for the end of for the duration of the season. I think he will get his minutes at some point as well, especially with the fixture list. We've just got so many games. Quickly, that's it. That's it, everyone. Thank you so much. The comments have been great. Really great comments. Honestly, I wish I could get through all of them, but there is just so many. And also, we've gone through the whole squad now. So every player for player, what we think and where we think their future lies as well at this club. Daniel, my guy, son of Chelsea, plug please away and let us know what you're doing at the moment and tell the people.
Thanks for having me on again. Great discussion. So yeah, daily videos about Chelsea basically on my channel. No rants, no hyperbole, just Chelsea. If you enjoy that, please go and check the channel out. We're nearly at 17k subs, pretty much on the brink of 17k subs. So hopefully we reach that soon. I've just done a collab with Nini FC. I'm sure a lot of you will know. So that will be up on the channel. And I've got my team selected, which is like my preview where I predict the lineup going out tomorrow. My rational perspective is my post-match review that goes out very soon after the game against Sheffield United. And of course, I've had Matisse on the channel before, and I think there's a nice collection of collabs there that we've had on the channel that sort of track Lampard's time at Chelsea. So you can go back to last season, and we had a lot of discussions throughout last season. We've already had one this season a few weeks back, so it's not that old, and we speak about a lot of different things. So definitely go and check the channel out, Son of Chelsea, and yeah, daily content, and hope you enjoy it and subscribe. And once again, thanks for having me on, mate.
My pleasure, man. Honestly, you had to be my first guest. I've appeared on your channel so many times now. I thought there's no better person to bring on here to speak about Chelsea, and especially at length as well when there's so much to speak about. Guys, thank you so much for watching the live show. This is the first one I've ever done on here with the new StreamYard setup. I'm an old school guy. Google Hangouts is what I knew, but this is all very new to me. The chat has been popping. You guys have been leaving some great comments. So please, if you haven't already, continue to support me on this new channel. It's only a couple days old. It's very young out the womb. And of course, the link in the description to Daniel's channel will be up after the stream. And please, if I haven't been able to get back to your comment, please leave a comment in the comment section after the stream, because I always go back and start debating with you guys in there, as I've been doing so far in all my videos. I try and go in there and reply as much as possible. So if you want to debate football, go in there as well, not just on Twitter. We do it on YouTube too. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow for another video.